Well, hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is a beautiful day here in Houston, Texas, where I am. And I would love to start out today. Let's get to know everybody. Drop in the chat. Where are you joining us from? So drop in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. I know Chris and Luke both claim to be in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but there might be some controversy around that. So yeah, Chris, where are you joining us from today?
I am in the beautiful part of Dallas called North Dallas. I'm told that where I live is closer to the Oklahoma border than it is to downtown Dallas. So Luke tells me that's not really Dallas.
That's right. It's definitely the outskirts. I'm in actual Dallas proper.
That's awesome. Yes. What do we call local Dallasites? Dallas.
That's right.
Dallasites. Yeah.
Yep.
There is not only is there competition between Houston and Dallas here in the great state of Texas, lots of rivalry between those two cities, but within the city of Dallas, there is quite the conversation around what is actually Dallas. So, well, Chris and Luke, thank you so much for joining us today. We've got people from all over the country. We've got Benson, who's also from Dallas. We've got folks from Virginia, North Carolina, Minnesota. Kaylee, is it snowing in Minnesota yet? It's 80 degrees here in Houston today. So I can only imagine it feels actually like winter in Minnesota. A couple people from Virginia and also Kelly from Ontario, Canada. So as you're chatting with us, in the chat panel, you'll notice there's an opportunity for you to check if you want to chat with everyone or with the hosts and panelists. And so I would recommend that you turn it on to everyone so we can all interact and get to know each other today. Kaylee says we did get a beautiful dusting of snow this morning and it's chilly. Amazing. So different from here in Houston. And Katie Bivens from Alabama. Katie and I used to work together. Good to see you, Katie. All right, everybody, we are jumping into an important topic, especially right now as we wrap up the end of this year and look ahead to 2024. Which is this idea of employee engagement. How do we actually create a culture of employee engagement? And then most importantly, how can we measure the results of that employee engagement? I don't know about you, Chris and Luke, but as a leader, I spend most of my days wondering, are all of these inputs actually going to pay off with an output? Then how do we know if that's actually going to work? And so today we're going to be able to walk you through our framework for how we create a healthy culture of employee engagement and then how we can actually measure that over time. So I'm Holly Tate. I'm our Senior Vice President of Growth here at Leadr. As of last week, I've been with the Leadr team for 2 years. I've spent over a decade in the leadership space, primarily in staffing and executive search, where I spent the majority of my career helping teams find the right people. But what I learned through that process was that is only the beginning. We can't just hire the right people. We've got to engage and grow them over time if we really want to see ourselves, our teams, and our organizations grow. So that's a bit about me. I'll be our host today. And I'm also joined by Chris Heaslip, our co-founder of Leadr, and Luke Friesen, who's one of our customers. He's the Senior Director of Operations at Watermark Community Church. So Chris, I'll let you introduce yourself and then we'll hand it over to Luke.
Awesome. Well, I hope you don't mind my wonderful Texas accent. I'm just winding you up. Actually, my accent is from New Zealand. I've been living in the States for 8 years, and prior to co-founding Leadr, was the CEO and founder of a company called PushPay. And we're going to talk about some stories from PushPay in a little bit. And just after doing that, had a real passion to help organizations grow and develop their people. And it's something that we did a lot of things right and a lot of things wrong, and just felt like there was not really a great tool set to really serve fast growing organizations to really help them engage their people better. So excited to share our story today and kind of where we're going.
That's awesome. Thanks, Chris. And Luke, if you'll introduce yourself so everybody can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah. Well, hey, everybody. It's great to be here with you. My name's Luke. We've been in our first year of partnering with Leadr as Watermark. So Watermark is a large non-denominational church, roughly 200 or so staff. My background is in the corporate world. I've been on staff here for about 10 years, most recently the last 5, leading our operations department. So as I frame it, all the business side of running a big nonprofit. But before that, post-MBA, I did 7 years of corporate performance improvement consulting. So it's been a fun mix of the business and the ministry side. And then our staff care team which is HR to other organizations, reports to me. So that's a big part of our staff development side of things.
So good. Well, Luke, we're grateful for your partnership and your leadership there at Watermark. And what I'm really excited to learn from both you and Chris today is we have a blend of nonprofit and church leadership and business leadership represented. And so on our webinar today, we also have that represented in our guests. And so to be able to speak to what is similar when we're running nonprofits versus corporate organizations, and also the differences that come with that. So we'll be able to discuss all of that together today. All right, well, we're going to start out with this big question, which is, why in the world does employee engagement matter? I don't know about you guys, but for me, many days, words like employee engagement can feel like a buzzword. It's like every business magazine you see or every blog you read, everybody is talking about it, especially on the heels of the Great Resignation. Everybody is wondering, why is employee engagement so important and how do we actually improve it? So Chris, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Why do you feel like employee engagement not only matters, but you literally started a whole company, AKA Leadr, to help solve this problem?
Absolutely. Well, I had a really formative experience trying to deal with employee engagement. PushPay grew from about 10 staff to about 500 over about 5 years. So the growth was, really fast. And there was a point where we had to start adding a lot of staff, and I started losing touch with the frontline staff members, a lot of whom I had hired personally, or I was in the interview loop. And there was a great story that I can kind of use to illustrate this. We had just hired, we're about 100 people. We had just hired a new VP of sales, and kind of for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to call him Bob. And so Bob came in, he headed up the sales team the first kind of 4 or 5 months. He did a lot of things really well. He started systematizing things and kind of made some really good decisions. And after about 4 or 5 months, unfortunately, the results started to drop off significantly. And it was just so marked that I was kind of a bit caught off guard, because I thought, Bob's a rock star, he's doing a great job. And I didn't know why. I could see the results, because of course sales is a very numbers driven part of the organization, but I couldn't figure out what was going on. And because I wasn't connected with frontline staff anymore, I didn't have any kind of data or anecdotal evidence that was coming to me to help me really try and diagnose exactly what the problem was. And so through a number of, we ran a process and ultimately decided that Bob wasn't the best fit for PushPay at that time. And so he left the organization. And actually, Matt Tressiter, who's the CEO of Leadr, took over his role as the VP of sales. And he came in and he said, hey, he was 27, brand new to the job. He said, hey, I don't know what to do. And I said, look, the first thing that you need to do is you need to have one-on-ones with every single person in your organization. And it was, 2 or 3 days of literally half an hour doing one-to-ones. And I think he did something like 40 one-to-ones in 2 days. And, it was just a lot of work of trying to get to understand from the frontline reps what was going on. And through that, we found out that Bob was a pretty autocratic leader. He was very kind of, you have to do it my way. I don't want to give you a lot of latitude in how you're going to execute your sales process. He told them, you have to do it exactly like I tell you to do this. And actually, of the, kind of top performers that we had, about 80% of them were either out looking for jobs or were planning to look for a job in the next kind of 30 days or so. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my goodness. If we hadn't have caught this, if I had, let this kind of go on longer, we would have started losing all of the best people that we had, worked incredibly hard to recruit to come and be part of our organization. And I started saying to myself, how could I let things get this bad? How could I not know that I have these completely disengaged employees that were so upset, they didn't feel like they could come and talk to me. and yet they were planning on looking for other jobs, or they were going to leave the organization. And so somehow I came across this tool that was, well, NPS, Net Promoter Score, is typically used in customer surveys to measure customer happiness. And I had saw that some people had started to adapt this to measure employee satisfaction and employee engagement. And the question in NPS, generally speaking, is how likely would you be between 1 and 10 to refer one of your friends to come and do business with this organization? And the way that was adapted to ENPS, Employee Net Promoter Score, is how likely would you be to refer a friend of yours to come and work at this organization? And what that measures is overall satisfaction with the organization, the company that people were working for. And there's a direct correlation between how engaged someone is and how good their manager is. Mm-hmm. And so there was no tooling available, like literally none. So I had one of my assistants, he came in and he had Google Forms. We created this kind of very hacked together kind of version of ENPS. And every single month, we would send out a survey to every single person in the employee saying, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to refer a friend to come and work at PushPay? And the information and the data we got back from a survey and a question that took literally 10 seconds to answer was unbelievably telling. And the key thing with insights, and Holly's going to dive into this a little bit, is what matters more than an absolute score. And this is not in true NPS. This is more like an average of the numbers on that 1 to 10 scale. Mm-hmm. What matters more than the absolute score is the direction that that number is trending in. Mm-hmm. And when the trend is down for several months in a row, there's a sign that you have a really, really big problem, because healthy teams and healthy employees and engaged employees do not have declining ENPS scores. They just don't. And so this is an example of what we would have on the left-hand side here. We blurred them out in this case, is the manager names. So in our case, if we had sales, for example, and we had 4 managers, we would break out the results by each manager. And then we would look at these numbers on a monthly basis at our senior leadership team meetings. And we kind of went into this Excel spreadsheet and we would highlight things that, you know, where things were going kind of down. And so you can see the top line. Of course, this is actually my direct reports, very healthy, green, you know, that's what you would expect for the CEO. But even in some cases, you can see, you know, it goes from 8 down to 7 and then kind of trends up around 8 or 9. That's great. But if you look at this bottom row here that I want to call out, you can see kind of on the left-hand side, it's 8, it's 9, and then it goes from 9, 7 to 6, and it kind of remains in that 6 to 7 range. And so this is actually a really, really big red flag. And in this exact case at the bottom here was something that was able to show me and indicate that there were massive problems going on in this team that I wasn't aware of. And so in this case, let's just pick a random name. We'll call the manager Tina. Tina was one of the leaders of the customer success function who was engaging with our customers on a frequent basis. Mm-hmm. And so what I did is I started going to have skip level meetings with people on Tina's team and hey, how's it going? How are you liking work? Of course, people tell you, everything's great here. We love it. You kind of get to the end and you say, hey, like, do you have any feedback that I could give to Tina on how she could improve as a leader? And of course, boom, straight away, people would say, yes. I mean, I took Tina out on a customer visit and she really is not good in front of customers. In fact, she really embarrassed me. She said some of the wrong things and some things that we were trying to do. She was actually saying things that were contrary to that. And so what was happening was, in front of her team members, she was just saying things that, were not productive in terms of helping work with with her team. And so through that, we were able to kind of find this problem super early, unlike with Bob, where we didn't even know what was going on. In this case with Tina, we were able to see there's a problem going on. I was able to meet with people, just, hey, how's it going? Asking questions, and then starting to really figure out, what is either the coaching that we can give Tina, or is Tina just not really a good fit for our organization, in which case we have to make a harder change. And in this case, we moved Tina to a different part of the organization. And I don't have it on this slide, but immediately, and I mean, within a month, the score went from being 5s to, 7s and 8s over the course of a 2 to 3 month period of time. Because first of all, staff felt like they were listened to. They felt like they had been heard, that we kind of saw proactively that something wasn't working, and we were able to change that. And so I just can't even begin to tell you, in my experience, even before coming to Leadr, how powerful these tools are to really get a handle on what's going on in your organization. And if you have more than one layer of management and you don't have any tool set like this to really see, then it's like you're a pilot flying blind and just hoping you don't crash into a mountain, because eventually something happens where people become upset. The leadership is not really doing what they should. And the problem is we just don't know. We're going to lose great people, and we're going to, most of all, just have disengaged employees. So
absolutely,
that's my story about, why this is so important.
Well, Chris, what's so powerful about that is what you learned with Bob. It sounds like it took months, maybe even more, to what your gut was telling you, what you were noticing, but you couldn't put your fingers on the data or the why. And a lot of times with our leaders, they're great at leading up, but it's a completely different experience leading down or sideways to the rest of the team. And so then when you had your spreadsheet model here, with which somebody just asked, what does ENPS stand for? It stands for Employee Net Promoter Score. Employee Net Promoter Score. And the question is, as Chris said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend a friend to work at PushPay or Leadr or Watermark or whatever your organization is? And so for you to be able to get ahead of this data, to see these indicators, these leading indicators of the lagging indicator, which is attrition, disengagement, all of those things, because often by the time that resignation letter hits our desk, it's too late. And so this data is able to help us surface some indicators before it's too late, so we can get ahead of it. And then the data, it lines up with your experience, Chris. I mean, there's so much data across the board, especially from Gallup. Gallup is my favorite organization to go to when it comes to workplace research. And so here's a few pieces of data that all of us need to be aware of and reminded of when we're trying to solve this problem of employee growth and development. So first of all, Gallup says that 80% of employees, 80%, 8 out of 10 of our team members are not engaged in the workplace. And this is so powerful, especially in this post-COVID world that we're living in right now, where the whole world has changed. The fact that only 20% of our team is showing up engaged, excited to be at work every day is a huge problem. Not to mention a problem for our organization and the mission that we have to accomplish, but it's also for that individual. We spend more of our time at work than anywhere else. We want our team members to be showing up excited about what they're doing each and every day. This other stat too, which you kind of hinted at this, Chris, that 75% of employees considered their direct boss to be the worst part of their job. So we know that people don't leave companies or organizations, they leave managers. So the number one thing you can do to increase employee engagement is to make sure that relationship is healthy between the manager and the direct report. And something like Employee Net Promoter Score helps you be able to see those indicators and get ahead of that. And then the last one is this one about the bottom line, which is what this webinar is all about today, that disengagement can cost your organization as much as 30% of an employee's annual salary. And that's not to mention, once they leave, how much it is to replace them. This is just them being in the seat, disengaged day in and day out, can cost 30% of an employee's annual salary. So I just want to let this sink in for a second so that we are all on the same page about the importance of employee engagement and how it really impacts not only our mission being accomplished, but also our bottom line and how we're if we're a nonprofit, how we're stewarding the finances that are given to us, and if we're a company, how we are driving results as a team in our growth. So Luke, I'm curious to hear from you and your own experience in consulting and then at Watermark leading through change. How have you seen this data or in your experience lived out day to day as you're thinking about employee engagement?
Yeah, what I was thinking about when Chris was talking was, man, I see some similarities, certainly different contexts, but thinking of Watermark's journey over the last 20 years, started with a Chevy Suburban sized staff where you could all pile into one car and head off to staff retreat. And you knew everything that was going on in everybody's life, to a staff of 200 plus, many of whom are quite new. The majority of our staff has been here not since the beginning. And, we've had fairly significant turnover over the last few years. So I would say that our management of all that was largely gut feel, and very diverse based on the skill set and wiring of the manager themselves. And so we would look at a 200-person organization and say, man, we're not quite sure what's going on here. We trust that things are okay, kind of the no news is good news approach, but how do we really know? How can we inspect and dig in and care for people? Really, that is our context, is trying to care for our staff as well as we can. But it was somewhat of a mystery to us. Now, we had been at the pinnacle, so to speak, of staff satisfaction a few years ago. We actually won an award as the best place to work in Dallas among secular organizations. And then we had Benson and I, who's on this chat, we were actually at that awards dinner and got to receive that with some other folks on our team, which was really, really fun. And then after that, we had the most tumultuous season we've ever experienced as an organization. The resignation of a senior leader, the turnover of a significant portion of our staff, an almost thorough overhaul of our board of directors, elders, as we call them. And so we were kind of looking at the Watermark 2.0, if you will, and saying, how do we make this a great place to work? How do we make sure our staff is engaged and developed? And this really was a felt need. We would talk to our people and they would say, what do we need? We need to be developed. So this topic of engagement, and then thinking of the Net Promoter Score, we actually would ask this, but only on exit interviews. And so we got a good sense from people who were leaving, who were quite possibly a little disgruntled in some cases. So maybe it's negatively skewed, but we asked folks, but did we really do anything with that? I came to realize no. And so now we're excited, as we have in the last few months, to ask that question on a regular basis of people who are still here, to Chris's point, so we can get kind of ahead of things.
That is so powerful, Luke. Well, Chris and Luke, I'm so grateful for your vulnerability and sharing your own lessons and your own leadership that you've been through. And that's what I want everybody to know, is that you're not alone. So we've got someone who just wrote into our panelists that said, I'm scared to see this data, because what if it tells us that we're really bad? I already know that we're really bad, and I'm scared to surface this data. And so, Chris, I would love for you to speak to that, because that's often the fear of, if I surface this data or if people leave, that's really scary. So what would you say to that, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at Adam and Anthony's questions, I mean, the first thing I'd say is just in general, a tool like this, the goal is to see some kind of improvement. And without any kind of scoreboard, how do we know if we're winning? And one of the questions I just love to ask our team, I walk around the office and just ask different folks in different departments, is, are you winning? And it got to be such a joke here at Leadr that they made me a drink bottle with a sticker on it, with my ugly mug on the sticker that says, are you winning? And I just think it's a great question, because we can ask things like, how are you doing? And how are you? And these kind of questions. But of course, it's just kind of trite, where it's like, are you winning? Well, the first question, of course, is, what does winning even look like? Mm-hmm. And I just have a couple of quick stories about that. But just to Adam, I would say, Adam, I don't want to get on the scales, because I don't want to look at the number that it tells me, but the point is, just, I can try and ignore what the scales is telling me. But at the end of the day, like, the goal is to look at the number and just figure out how to make a small step, a small improvement along the way. And the goal is not to go from 0 to 100. When we would look at these numbers on the eNPS score, sometimes there were managers that even seemed to be great culture fits, great people, and we would just end up coaching them. Or we would have one of the folks from the learning development team or someone just, how could we mentor you? How could we find someone to really help just take a step at a time along the one way. And it's just a small step at a time. But I think to this point is a lot of people in the workplace just don't have clarity on what winning looks like. And how can people be engaged? How can they feel like they're winning when they don't even have really clear goals?
Yeah.
Just, they come to work. Sorry, Holly.
Oh, sorry, real quick. Well, I was going to say before, because winning is such an important one, but there's a quote that you say often to me that is so powerful that I think would be encouraging to everybody, which is the question is not what if they leave, it's what if they stay. And in order for us to do that, Luke, to your point, if we're asking employee net promoter score at the end, then that doesn't help us because they've already left. But what if we ask them that employee net promoter score? It's not great. We get 1% better every single day. And then before we know it, we've got this incredible team that stayed with us and put in the hard work of improving over time. And that's where our mission can really be accomplished. So I just wanted to make sure that we got that from you, Chris, because it's your wisdom that I hear so often that I wanted to make sure we encourage everybody with. It's not what if they leave, it's what if they stay. And so, oh yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Well, just one of the biggest things that I think we can do as leaders is, we love to look at lagging metrics. I love to look at, the weight on the scales, and I like to see that I'm winning. But what we have to do is say, look, we have to be a little more mature than that. How do we look at leading indicators? If I track my calories every day and I track how many steps I'm taking, the weight is going to take care of itself. And so the lagging indicator here is turnover, disgruntled employees that are not engaged. But what is the leading indicator? Well, that's exactly what Insights is designed to do, is to tell you ahead of time, look, we've got, hey, I'm eating 4,000 calories a day. The red light's going off. That's going to result in some lagging indicators that we don't like, that we're going to have to address.
It's so true. So with that, what we've learned is that there are 3 leading indicators that lead to the lagging indicator of engagement. So that's what we're going to unpack together today. So get your notepads out, your Apple Notes, your Evernote, take some notes here from Chris and Luke as we jump in. And the first of those is clarity, which we're going to jump into. So maximization, clarity, and rapport. These are the foundations of employee engagement. When we have all 3 of these things, these leading indicators, they lead to the lagging indicator of employee engagement. So maximization is the question of, am I performing at my best? Clarity is, do I even know what winning looks like? Because I can't perform at my best unless I know what my best looks like. I have clarity of what does winning look like. And then rapport is, do I trust my leader and my teammates? Which we know that trust is the foundation of any relationship, definitely in the workplace. So Chris, let's jump into clarity. This is your favorite line, which is, are you winning? Everybody on the team needs to know what winning looks like, from the senior leader all the way down to the frontline employees. So Chris, unpack for us why this question is so important to you and why you walk around the office asking everyone if they're winning all the time.
Absolutely. I think that you can't start with any kind of growth as an employee without focusing first on what goals are. And I think we love to think that growth is reading books and going to conferences, listening to podcasts, but that's not really how people grow. How people grow is by taking on a task that is going to challenge them and put them just outside of their comfort zone, just like, sorry with all the fitness metaphors, but just like lifting weights is going to be really challenging. We've got to lift something that's just a little more heavy than what we can lift. And then we're going to start to see that we're going to start to get stronger. And so to me, the scoreboard for how are we developing employees starts with, do we have clear goals? And are they written down, documented, and aligned through the whole organization, so that at the end of the quarter, I can say, hey, things were really great, or, well, I really tried to take on something difficult this quarter and it didn't work out. But that's okay, because our team leaders, our management structure is here to help coach you and guide you and help you get to where you want to go. And so I think the single most important thing that we can ask our employees is, how do you know if you're winning? And of course, it fits into the other one of our 5 foundations, which is, where do you want to go? Because as a leader, I want to help coach and develop you based on what your personal goals are and where you want to go 5-10 years from now. And so inside of Leadr, we actually have a great way that you can facilitate that. where you can actually write the goals down. It's important that they're written down and that there's alignment between the manager and the employee, because just having an employee write something, or even having a manager just top down tell you this is your goal, and really, especially millennials, they really struggle with someone just turning up and saying, this is what your goal is. You can steer a person that way. You can kind of lead them and say, look, this is what the company needs from you. But there really has to be a dialogue to say, this is just the basis for your job description. But outside of that, or in addition to that, what are the things you're going to take on to try and really stretch and grow a little bit more this quarter?
It's so true. And I see too many teams spend at the executive level, often months. They bring in a consultant, they put a strategic plan together, and they're like, okay, we've got goals. But what the gap is in actually executing on those goals and seeing our mission lived out is the gap between the executive team and the frontline employees. And so we've got to make sure that that strategic plan isn't just locked away in some boardroom, but that every single team member across the entire organization has a clear goal so that they know what winning looks like and how their day-to-day job contributes to the overall mission of the organization. And so in Leadr, what we've designed is that their goals show up at the top of every single one-on-one. Because if it's just stored in a spreadsheet or it's on an intranet somewhere, it's really easy to forget. In the day-to-day to-do list, the tyranny of the urgent, that goal will fall to the wayside. But when we have it front and center, not only is it a reminder to us on a day-to-day basis, but it also reminds our leader to help make sure that we're removing obstacles as much as possible to help that person win. Because if it's not an individualized goal that I can take ownership as a person, then I'm not going to be motivated to do it. If it just feels like something that's a directive or I've been given by someone on senior leadership, the likelihood of that goal being accomplished is very, very unlikely. But when it lives in my one-on-one, here's what we're looking at here, where Anna has actually created her own action items. She's owning her growth and development of what it looks like to create this toolkit that she's outlined here. So clarity is so important, and it's not just at the executive level. It definitely starts there. But in order to have clarity across the organization, every single person on our team has got to have clear goals front and center on a daily basis, so they can track that progress over time and see how their inputs results in the output of the mission of the organization. All right, the next one is maximization. So once we know what winning looks like, then the question becomes, do I have the tools and resources that I need to win? And so I would love to hear from you, Luke. You've got a really cool story about how you guys did this at Watermark, of really tangible ways that you resourced your team. So what does it look like on the Watermark team, and what have you learned over your leadership experience to make sure that every single person has the tools and resources they need to win?
Yeah. First, I'm going to out ourselves. I have our Leadr Insights dashboard pulled up right now. And our rapport is strongest, which makes sense. We're a trust-based relational organization. Maximization is second, and then clarity is third. It's not too distant, but that goal setting and all the clarity and making sure the organization's direction and priorities are reflected down to the line level staff, that is very much a journey that we are still on. So I'm excited to let clarity jockey for position up higher. But right now, maximization. Yeah. So a few months ago, I forget exactly how many, but we had an opportunity to put in front of our staff a what do you need survey, if you will. And so we just sent it out to everybody. Just said, man, we want to make sure, because at a leadership team level, we had talked about hearing anecdotes from a variety of people of, oh, I could really use this to be more successful, or I could use that. So we said, well, let's ask everybody within the organization what they could need. So we just did our toe into this water was a blast out to everybody on staff. Basically, hey, what do you need? Fill out this form stack. And what we got back was, everything from an extra monitor to a conference to a mentoring relationship to, a particular training or certification that would be helpful. So we got this big list of, 50 or so odd things that people had submitted. And then we took a particular staff meeting where we were all together and kind of got to go a little Oprah style on this, where people didn't know this was about to happen, but some of our staff that we actually created this song and all this other stuff to essentially give out to the people that had requested those things. Hey, Jim gets this conference. Hey, Sally gets this extra monitor. Chance gets to go to this training and get this project manager certification. Kind of really added some energy and some buzz to that. And part of that was, one, we wanted to give those people those things that they needed to thrive. But the more strategic part was to let everybody else know, hey, when you make your needs known, we're going to respond to those things as well as we possibly can. And to cultivate this environment of being able to say, oh, you know what would help me be even more successful? This thing right here. So it's a journey that we're still on, but it was fun to have some moments to really celebrate that and to be able to bless some folks with additional resources to win.
Well, and that is so connected to rapport too, because what you did there was you showed the team, hey, we heard you, and now we are executing on what you've asked of us. And I mean, I bet, you'll see your rapport score just go so much higher after an experience like that, when you've actually followed through on what the team asked and requested of what they needed in order to be fully maximized in their role and win. So I love it. It reminds me of the Oprah, like, you get a car, you get a car. Yeah. What a fun, engaging way for you to do that in front of the whole team, to show when you ask for something, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we're able to resource you with what you need to go win. So Chris, at Leadr, we have something called the CEO Book Club, which I know is something that you created a couple of years ago. So talk to us about what that looks like here at Leadr.
Absolutely. I mean, I think all readers are leaders, right? So you have to be, constantly helping your team level up, and like Lucy said, give them tools to really allow people to kind of take the reins of their own kind of growth, so that they can, if people are growing, they're going to be serving you and your organization even better. So one of the things I had heard about was something called the CEO Book Club at other organizations. And the concept is really simple, which is, if you come across any book that you think will help you in your job and you promise to read it, then we'll buy it for you. And what does a book cost? $20, $25? I mean, it's not a big expense for an organization to shell out, $20. And look, a lot of people don't take advantage of it. Some take advantage of it a lot. But, just think of the ROI from that, from one employee, who says, yeah, I'm going to do the work. I'm going to read this book. It could be on sales, could be on marketing, or could just be generally on how to be a better leader. And I just think the ROI on that is going to be, infinite almost, because it's so cheap to buy the book. We don't ask for a review. Adam, great question. We just say, we trust the fact that you're going to read it. And, if people give us their word, then we trust that they actually follow through and do read the book.
It's so true. Our team loves it. Actually, one of my team members, the person on our team who orders all the books, she said, no more for this year, because they were ordering so many books. And it's not in the spirit of no more, but it was just our team is soaking it up so much that it was just amazing to see how excited they were about the CEO Book Club, and just the gift of being able to learn and grow. Our company saying, our commitment to you is, if you finish it, we'll buy it for you, which is so exciting. All right, some practical ways of what this looks like in your one-on-ones. So number one, I do this in my one-on-ones. You're actually looking at a one-on-one with Kristen and Anna on our team. And one of the things that you're seeing here is a recurring agenda item that is, what do you need to win? So you can see here where Kristen's asking, what are you working on and what steps are you taking today? You can see here, Anna's asking Kristen, what do you need to say no to this week? And so the power of Leadr, where you can have your recurring agenda items, put a recurring agenda that says, what do you need to win this month? How can I help you? And then we also want to make sure that we're empowering, to your point, Luke, our team members to be able to proactively ask for what they need. And so encouraging our team, our CEO, Matt, did this a few weeks ago, encouraged every single person on our team to put a topic in our one-on-one that with our manager that says, where do I stand? Which is asking for feedback on, am I winning? From your perspective, am I winning? And so being able to encourage our team to consistently keep maximization front of mind is a really, really powerful way you can do this in your weekly one-on-ones. And then Luke, you guys send out a survey to your team. You can actually do that through Leadr, through the feedback tool. You can send a survey to your team to say, hey, what tools and resources do you need to win? And how can we help you with that? Get all that data back and be able to process that as a team. And you're going to learn so much to be able to improve employee engagement just by asking that one question. All right, the third one is rapport. And the concept here is, do I trust my leaders and my team? So again, Gallup tells us that the variance of an employee's engagement, 70% of that variance is directly dependent on their relationship with their manager. So rapport is critical between a manager and a direct report. And I've learned this firsthand. I'll never forget the most helpful feedback that I ever have received in my leadership over the last 10 years. It was actually in an exit interview. So to your point, Luke, it's like, why can't we ask these things before the exit interview? We'd be so much farther ahead if we were proactive about it. I said, hey, what feedback do you have for me and my leadership as you leave our team and as I, lead other people? I'd love to learn from you. And she said, Holly, you are great at you're great at finding all of the things that we need to improve, but it'd be really nice if you could stop and celebrate everything that we're doing and it's right in front of us on a day-to-day basis. It was like, oh my goodness. That feedback was so helpful because what I realized was, I'm a performance-driven person. I'm a high D. I'm a 8 on the Enneagram. I love to get things done, love to check things off the list. And I'm always looking for ways that we can improve. But if my team doesn't trust me to see the wins and celebrate them along the way, then that is going to lead to them being burned out or frustrated or just always feeling like they're losing, which goes back to number one, are you winning? And if they're not hearing from me where they're winning and pointing out those opportunities, it's really difficult to build rapport and win trust with the team. And so that's something that I've taken with me over the years. And even recently at Leadr, I went from a team of 4 people on my team to a downline of about 43 people within a couple weeks, because we were in super fast growth mode. And to be able to have insights at my fingertips so I could see how the team was tracking before I was leading the team, and then be able to use that data as I've been leading the team to see, hey, where does our team feel like they're winning? Or do they feel like they have the right tools and resources to succeed? And do they trust not only me as a leader, but our entire leadership team, their direct managers, and each other? And so having that data at my fingertips has been a game changer, and to be able to surface that before it's too late. Because what I don't want is for that to come up in an exit interview and be a surprise. I really want to make sure that I'm getting ahead of that as the leader so that my team feels like they can trust each other and me and their managers as their leader. So rapport is critical, especially when we're leading through change. So here's a couple of practical examples of what this looks like. This is my one-on-one with Kristen on our team. Every single week, I have a recurring agenda item at the very top that's, how are you really doing? So I asked Kristen, how are her and her kids doing? What's key here is that I'm being so intentional to make sure that I'm communicating to Kristen that no matter how many more topics are on this agenda item, no matter how many things that we have to do, the most important thing to me is, how is Kristen doing? Because none of those other things are going to get done. Our mission won't be accomplished if Kristen is not doing well. And so it really helps me as the leader hold space to make sure that we can have that intentional conversation on a week-to-week basis. And then the second question that I ask her on a weekly basis is, how can I provide clarity? And because again, clarity, maximization, and rapport. And so when we start with trust of asking, how are you really doing? Then we can dive into, do you have the clarity you need to go win this week? They're all so related. So hopefully that is a helpful practical step for you to go into your one-on-one this week and add a couple questions like that are recurring. The power of recurring, it just communicates to your team that this is so important. We're going to talk about this on a weekly basis. It's even more important when you're leading through a time of busyness or a time of change, which the reality is we're all in that right now. The whole world has changed post-COVID. The workplace has changed. And so it's so important that you're prioritizing rapport. So Luke, I know you guys have been you've been leading through a season of change there at Watermark. I don't know if there's anything that you want to speak to on the rapport side that you've learned over the last couple of years.
One of the things, so we talk about our 3 core trusts at Watermark a lot. We talk about professional trust, which is essentially maximization here, that you know what your job is, that you're able to execute it at a high level. We talk about relational trust, which is the rapport. Do we have a great relationship? And then being a church, we talk about spiritual trust. Are we walking the talk? And so those have been a priority for a long time. And so I can see the fruits of those things, and I love seeing the synergy and the parallels between those trusts and these kinds of rapport that we're talking about. And one of the things that I was thinking of as you were talking and seeing the "how are you really doing" question, one of our thoughts going into this journey of using Leadr with our staff was, how is a piece of software going to help us with our people? And really, I've seen a lot of software, especially back in my consulting days. And I am jaded enough to know that a system doesn't automatically or magically fix anything. But one of the things that I forget who on the Leadr team told me, but one of the things that I heard early on in this evaluation process was, what really matters is the underlying habits and practices that the software supports. The tool, yes, of course it matters, and how it's designed and built really matters, but the habits and practices that it helps you live out on a day in, day out, week in, week out basis are what really is going to drive change. And so thinking about that agenda item of how are you really doing? And man, if I have a pulse of that, I am winning as a manager. If I really could answer that in near real time or close to it for each of the people on my team, I'm going to be doing a pretty good job as a leader. So that's one of the things that I'm a fan of here is it gives me a reminder that I should be asking that question. I'll out myself as I'm not the most relationally wired person. My nickname on staff is All Business Friesen. So I've been working on my emotional intelligence and empathy and all those things. So this is helpful for me to just stop and, okay, I need to ask people how they're really doing and not be typing on the laptop screen while I'm doing it, but to actually maybe set the computer aside and, hey, I know this is on the agenda, let's talk. So I do see this as a really valuable thing in those 3 areas that we talked about.
Definitely. That intentionality goes a long way. All right, well, let's talk about a real practical next step. So we've talked about why employee engagement is so important. We've talked about the 3 leading indicators to employee engagement, which is clarity, maximization, and rapport. So now what? What do we do now? And so the next step is for you to send monthly and quarterly surveys to your team. And so when I was at my previous role, we actually built a culture survey. It was called the Culture Tool. And it was awesome because it helped us be able to show our clients what their culture score was. But the problem with it was only one moment in time. And so by the time the leadership team would get that data, process that data, it would take anywhere from 3 to 6, sometimes 9 months. And then the leadership team would come to a conclusion and say, okay, here are the changes that we're going to roll out based on this data. And by that time, half the team is turned over, it's too late, and we're making changes based on data that is now completely irrelevant. So culture surveys are super helpful, but it only gives us a one moment in time. And so what we did here at Leadr, we put our heads together and we said, what would it look like if we had a tool that showed us what is our employee engagement now, today? How are we tracking over time? And then what are the practical action steps that we need to improve now? So what is our employee engagement today? What is our progress over time? And what are the practical action steps that we need to do to improve today? And so that's why we created Insights. And Insights is real-time data. It's constantly updating as your team is completing their surveys. And so on a monthly basis, what we do is we send out 3 simple questions. And that's what you're looking at here at the very top. So this one goes with clarity. They're aligned with clarity, maximization, and rapport. It's, I understand what is expected of me in my role. And they get to agree or disagree on that. And then they're going to get a question about maximization. And then they're going to get a question about rapport every single month. Super quick, easy question. And then once a quarter is where we ask the employee net promoter survey, which is on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely am I to recommend someone to work at Leadr or your organization? And then we're able to see that populate all in real time. So we don't have to wait until this once a year event. It's dynamic, and we have that data at our fingertips at all time. Then what's also powerful, a problem that we saw and that I saw in my previous role was I only got a glimpse of what the entire organization was, but I couldn't dial it down by department or manager. And then Chris, you spent hours in spreadsheets trying to figure that out previously. So he said, what difference would it make if we were really able to dial in not only by department, but by that individual manager so that we can see, hey, Holly looks like she's struggling over here with her team. What's going on there? And not in a spirit of, shame or guilt, but in a spirit of how can we help coach that manager to improve so that they are driving outcomes for their team and that their team is engaged. And so with insights, as long as that person has 2 direct reports, because there needs to be some confidentiality there where people feel the psychological safety to be able to tell the truth within surveys like this, they're able to see not only how they're performing as a manager, but also how their entire department or even a user group. We use this with our new onboarding cohorts. You can see how new people that start together in their onboarding experience, how is their engagement over time, which is a really powerful way to track employee engagement and get an indicator of how that's going over time. But data is only as helpful as context, right? So what we don't want to do is just leave a bunch of data there and say, good luck. We've actually built a process where based on your score, you get practical next steps for how you can improve in each of these areas: rapport, clarity, and maximization. And this is always populated right here inside of your Leadr tool. So you as a manager and you as an executive team can get practical action steps for how to improve based on your scores. So we're going to move here into Q&A. I want to make sure that you get the opportunity to throw them in the chat and either in the chat or in the Q&A. But what I want to make sure that you know that your opportunity in front of you is to get a free 30-day trial of Leadr Insights. So you can try this with your team and be able to get that benchmark. As Chris talked about, we don't know where we need to go unless we know where we currently are. It's about making progress over time. And so everybody who is on this webinar today will get the opportunity to try Leadr Insights, get a baseline of where your team is so that our team can work with you on how to improve your employee engagement over time. So I'm going to check out our chat here. Chris, I just saw that you put something in the chat that you wanted to share. So I'd love to hear from you as I'm checking out the questions that we've got so far today.
Yeah, there's some great questions about just, survey fatigue and just people worried about having, too many surveys coming through. I think the first thing is you're not going to get 100% response rate. So, have a realistic point of view of kind of what a good response rate looks like. But second of all, so long as the survey is reasonably quick, I mean, there's not really an excuse to kind of not do it. But I think the third part is that we would also talk about in our all hands, our all staff meetings and explain, here's why we do this. And like pretty much, at least if it wasn't every month, it was every other month, we would say, this is why we do it. This is what we do with the results. And then I'm not saying you need to do this, but we would also put up the line showing the average number across the whole company. And when that was down, we wouldn't try and hide that. We would say, look, this is why we are asking for your input, is to give us feedback on if the company is not feeling it, if people on the front lines are struggling, then this is good. We're acknowledging that, we're not trying to hide it. So that's how we implemented it. And I think just those couple of really small additional things, telling people why this is important and telling them how their feedback is going to help us make improvements, really, should significantly improve and shoot up the response rate to the survey. And then, people always say, look, do we really have to do this every month? But, it worked out great for us. And so long as you can get around about a 70% response rate, that's a good sample size to be able to get a indication on how people are feeling.
Yeah. And I think the key here is that you will drive more engagement when you show progress on the feedback that you're hearing from your team. So if you're sending out surveys and then your team never hears anything about it, that's going to erode trust immediately. But if, to what Luke and the Watermark team did, you send out a survey and then they see an immediate result of resources in their hands based on what they requested from the team, that is the best way to build trust with the team. Luke, what happened when you did Insights for the first time? What did you do? How did you present that data to your team? And what was the result of that?
Yeah, so we're still on the front end of our Insights journey overall. We have about 3 monthly surveys under our belt. And this does relate to a question that I saw Benson throw in the chat too. But initially, as the kind of the internal executive champion for this Leadr initiative, I see all this stuff first. So I get to kind of feast my eyes on the data. But we were in a leadership meeting about 3 months ago, and I've really been trying to get executive support for this whole effort. And the insights tool was one of the most engaging, probably the most engaging way to do that so far. So we're in our leadership meeting, and I take my computer and I, throw the data up onto the large television monitor in the conference room. And we start with organizational metrics. Hey, at Watermark, here's how we're doing at engaging overall, rapport, clarity metric. There weren't yawns in the room. People were generically interested. But then I shifted to the department view mode and then to the manager view mode, where you see each of those things by team. And people literally were jumping out of their chair, clustering around the television monitor, and looking where they stacked up, where their departments stacked up. And then, some friendly ribbing certainly ensued, and all sorts of interesting commentary on, oh man, look at this team or look at that team. So it was incredibly engaging at the leadership level to see that for the first time. And it was that, oh, here's what my gut would have told me. Oh, look, here's what the data says. And either it is in line with that, or maybe it's a totally different message. But it was fascinating to see. I mean, we were laughing. Our senior pastor was in there. I mean, he was just cracking up to see how everybody was so in tune with the information. So yeah, it was highly engaging. I'm excited to see what we do with it going forward. So that was really fun. And frankly, again, to out myself, the least engaged team on our staff is one of my teams.
Wow.
And it makes sense if you know the context. It's one of our support functions, and it is a very challenging support function to be a part of in our particular context. And so at a lunch not long after, I was sitting down with the leader of that team, and I said, hey, my number one priority for you and your team right now is your team's morale. And just tell me how you guys are doing and how I can help and all that stuff. Forget the executing of the tickets, let's talk about how you guys are doing. And so it was very engaging at a leadership level, and then it's helped me have some very specific conversations too.
Well, and that's so powerful, Luke, because not only were you able to lead with vulnerability of saying like, hey, a team in my downline is one of the ones that's the lowest. And so now I can go and talk to that leader like you did and say, my number one priority is to help support you with this team. That goes such a long way to the rest of the staff. And then I think that also just shows the story of how it's not as scary as you think when you're able to surface this data, because I bet that our managers are way more eager for this data than we realize they are. Because they want to win. Everybody wants to be a great leader. I don't know anybody that shows up every day and says, I'm good. They want to be a great leader. It's just a matter of really understanding what winning looks like as a leader, and Insights gives them that data to be able to have actionable steps to improve that with their team. Yeah, Chris, what were you going to share?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that are really important to know here. Number one, like just remember, this is an average. So an ideal situation, you've got 3, 4, 5, 6 people being polled might be a good size. Even bigger sample sets and that are even more helpful. But just remember, it's an average score that we're looking for that particular team. And so, yeah, like there's going to be times when you have one staff member gets maybe a bad performance review and they are disgruntled and they put low marks on the score. But like an average kind of generally buffers that out a bit. So, the goal is that. The other thing too is, like Luke called out, there's a team, they have a low score. Like, to me, low is okay so long as it's not going down further. And it's the trend that really matters, because people are looking at that and saying, okay, like what can we do to just move that a little bit at a time? That's really the goal, is to just see some small improvements continue to kind of take hold. And then the last thing I think is really important around this is, as we think about looking at the kind of we would look at the numbers on like a team basis. Is it 7, 7, 10, 1? Is a little different than 4, 7. So just trying to get a handle on what those numbers are and what the makeup is. And if someone gets a low score, like someone didn't get a 4 or 3 on the score and then they're fired, what that is an opportunity to go and gather more kind of qualitative data to figure out what really is going on. And so when you remember my story about the second manager, it's not that the score was really bad, therefore that's it. It was, hey, I'm going to go meet with people on the team. I'm going to find out. It's not determinative. It's just, I'm going to go and dig in a little more. That's really the benefit of the tool, is it gives you the early warning sign to go and do something about it.
Yes, you nailed it, Chris. It's small improvements over time and taking action steps towards that progress. Well, thanks for joining, everybody. In the chat, you're going to find a link. We're actually going to continue this conversation with an exclusive Q&A with Luke Friesen here, who's going to walk us through even more of his learnings and answer some of those questions. So Ed, I just saw you sent something in. Would love to answer your question here in the Q&A. So I'm going to leave this up for a second so that everybody can grab this link here that Anna has just put in the chat, and we will see you over in the other Zoom for the exclusive Q&A with Luke. But Chris and Luke, thank you so much for sharing your story. And Chris, thank you for learning from your past experiences and then creating a software and a tool that we're able now all to be the benefit from and be able to be better leaders because of it. So we so appreciate you. And Luke, thank you so much for your partnership with Leadr and your great leadership to the team there at Watermark. We appreciate you.
My pleasure.
All right, everybody, I'm going to hop over into the other Zoom. It's right here in the chat if you want to click on that, and it'll pop you right over to our exclusive Q&A with Luke. Thanks, everybody.